Hello and welcome to this panel discussion with 4 newlywed couples. I'm Pastor Dave Grothe, and today we're going to talk about the dynamics of the first year or two of the marriage. Today we've got some really great panelists. Married just 4 months, Taylor and Gabriella. Married a couple of plus years with 1 son, Ethan and Jesse. Greg and Brianna have been married now going on 3 years. It'll be 3 this spring, is that correct?
We're just over 2.
Just over 2, so they're just celebrating over 2. And then Danny and Donica, married 2 plus years, and their son is how many months? 6 months. So we've got 2 couples here with a son in their home, which is we'll get to that dynamic. But since we flipped a coin to see who would have the first response, here's the first topic. Ethan and Jesse, what surprises have you 2 encountered during these first years of your marriage?
I think the real question is, what haven't we experienced in the last 2 years? So we unexpectedly got pregnant immediately after we got married. So we spent, the first year of marriage, me being pregnant, had a really traumatic birthing experience and pregnancy. I left my career that I had worked really hard for. He's changed careers multiple times. We moved in the middle of the holidays. It's been a lot, but, it's just allowed us to grow as individuals and mostly as a couple.
Yeah, she hit all the big major life changes. I think we hit the home run in the previous year. So all that was within pretty much the first year of being married. So, that comes with its own challenges. You gotta adapt as they come, stay supportive of each other, communicate, because it's definitely stressful. You just gotta learn how to navigate it and keep Christ-centered through that navigation. That's what really guides us through all those challenges. So, yeah.
Gabriella, 4 months in, what are you surprised about?
We had talked about it, and I think we both agreed that basically you can't hide your good and bad days in marriage. Like whenever we were dating, we'd have a bad day, we'd go home, sleep it off, and then you'd get the better version of me the next day. But whenever you're waking up, going to sleep with the same person, it's just like, hey, this is my bad day, and now you're working through it with the same person. It's not just you going through it, it's y'all going through it. So.
I would say I was kind of saying the same thing, but also kind of how you're kind of learning how to be there and help the other person on their bad days. I think that was a learning curve for us because something that always helped me necessarily wouldn't help her. Even if she's like sick or not feeling good, it's like, oh, well, this is what helped me. This is what my mom did for me. That's not what she has always gone through, or I have to learn how to be there for her, and it's not always the way that I would be there.
Brianna has told the story, and she and Greg formally solemnized their marriage on the ski slope and are heading toward, after 2 years, just over 2 years of being married, you're heading toward a wedding ceremony publicly in the days ahead. But the dynamics of going ahead and needing to get married sort of in the pandemic era, tell us about it. What have been the surprises?
Sure. I think definitely you hear a lot that people don't change, but I don't think that's true at all. I think that we're highly complex individuals and we adapt and change probably every day as we learn and go through different experiences. But I think what surprised me is how much we just naturally have adapted to each other, whether that's in our lifestyle, our habits. The way that we lived on our own, we definitely don't live that same way just under the same roof now. We have different lifestyles, and so just how naturally that happened has really kind of surprised me as I look back on where we've come over the past 2 years.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest surprise has been how much we kind of fulfill our need for socializing, just by how good of friends we are. It used to be when we were just dating, I would have times where I would really be eager to see friends or see family, but now living this life together and always being around one another, I don't really feel that need as much anymore, because we're just such great people for each other.
Danny and Donica are both professional musicians and have had a career and working together in music. And these last 2 years, it's been a joy to watch how your musicianship has sort of influenced your marriage a little bit, making some music at home. Donica, what's been the surprise?
I feel like I actually had like 2 surprises that were true surprises because I just wasn't expecting them. Danny and I had talked a lot about like, what are our roles going to be as husband and wife? And I thought we did like all the really awesome, good work to do that. And one of those things was like, I'll be in charge of putting the home together and making it look nice. And Danny has a lot of opinions about home decor. I thought I was going to just be able to get to do all of that. And sometimes it would take us 3 months to pick a rug because we couldn't agree on it. But that's a pretty minor one. One of the bigger ones that we ran into was alone time boundaries. Because I'm extroverted and Danny is an introvert. Yeah, you can, here, I'll let you speak more to that.
Yeah, so like she said, I am highly introverted. I think last time I took Myers-Briggs, I came out like 75% introverted. And when we were dating, I loved hanging out with her. I was like, I mean, it feels like Donica's the exception to me, like getting super worn out socially. Then we got married and we started living under the same roof, and I realized, oh, when you live with the person you're married to, it's like you're socializing almost all the time. And then I also like started feeling all this pressure of like, I just like, Donica's extroverted, she loves connection, she loves interaction, I just have to be there and I have to be available. And there came moments where it was really frustrating for me because I was just like, I cannot do that. I'll die. Like it's a lot. I have to be able to retreat like for a bit at least every day. And so learning the dynamic that had to exist around that when I didn't think that would be a thing at all was one of the biggest learning curves and one of the biggest surprises for me.
I'm not surprised at what you've experienced. I want to ask Taylor, what expectations that you had during your engagement have you had to adjust since you've been married?
Yeah, I would also just say kind of don't have any expectations on the other person that you wouldn't have for yourself. I would say a big thing for me is I'm like a clean freak, and she's not. And that was really hard when we moved in, and it was like, well, I want these things a certain way, and it's like, well, the bathroom's a mess, and I'm not a huge fan of that. So that was a big adjustment for me as far as the living situation. And it's a lot harder, it's a lot easier said than done to keep things clean for 2 people instead of 1. But also just learning how to communicate that to the other person and being like, oh yeah, well, we can't always do this, but like, let's designate a day to do this, or let's communicate to each other what we expect from the other person as far as living situation.
Adjustments, Gabriella?
One of the biggest adjustments for expectations was because we got engaged and married within the span of 3.5 months, I expected marriage to be like, like everything is like normal and we get to grow old together and we can just do life at a slower pace. And that did not happen. I mean, everything changed. Finances changed. I mean, planning for kids, and we got a dog, and now Taylor's leaving for the Air Force next week. Like, things are constantly changing for both of us, so that expectation of peace all the time when everything's gonna be hunky-dory was something that I had to let go of, because honestly, the Lord was stretching us and preparing us for things that we ourselves didn't think we were prepared for.
You mentioned the Air Force. The couple next to you are both military veterans. Thank you for your service, Ethan and Jesse. What expectations have you two had to adjust that you had prior to getting married?
So I think the common saying that expectation leads to disappointment really comes into fruition when you're married. When we were dating and when we were engaged, we had so much time and opportunity to share our hobbies and do things that we love, hike 14ers together, and everything was very frivolous and carefree. And then when you get married and you live under the same roof and you add a child to the picture, you realize that the way that you operate, even though you may have the same things in common, who you are is so drastically different. And I'm extremely type A, like extremely organized, very, very driven, and like I want things done a very specific way. And I always assume that he feels that same way about things. But the reality is that just because something is happening a certain way and I think it's right doesn't mean that he sees things the same way. And it can lead to friction, all because like we're just not seeing things from the other's lens. And so navigating that and being like, wait, let me slow down. How do you see this? And we can have an open dialogue about that.
Yeah, once again, she hit the nail on the head. It's, you know, you got when you don't communicate expectations, it's hard to meet those expectations. So then that turns into.
Did you ever feel like you had unrealistic expectations or realize that?
No, it's, you know, she's definitely type A, and you know, before we met, I would have said I was type A, but now I'm definitely type B. I just go with the flow, like. So molding that A and B together when, you know, I'm supposed to be the leader of the house, especially now that I got a son. So that's a new dynamic I'm changing to. It's hard for me. It's a challenge. So that creates natural friction. We had a good friction point this past week, and we ended up working through it. So it's just learning as we go.
Greg, you met in engineering school. Both of you are professional engineers, designers, builders, creators, planners. What have you learned and had to adjust being now not just married, but working together in your engineering careers? What have you had to adjust?
Yeah, I liked everything that's kind of been said before about not having firm expectations for each other, especially ones that you wouldn't have for yourself. That's kind of in the same vein as we transitioned kind of from that college phase to early career, and now we're living together. And so with all that different phases of life, we've kind of not really had really any time to develop expectations of like, this is how life is now. And I think that's actually been healthy for us because we understand that the relationship will continue to evolve and that nothing will kind of really reach a steady state or be stagnant. So we won't have those expectations of like, this is how we are forevermore type of thing.
Yeah. And we are very organized, planned. We love spreadsheets. We're definitely those kind of people, and I definitely am. And so I think to a great extent, I kind of anticipated that in marriage, and you had mentioned roles and responsibilities, that they'd be pretty defined, that we'd kind of know who is responsible for A versus B and how all that would work. And what we've discovered is that it is way more fluid than we would have anticipated. And a good thing too, you know, there are weeks where one of us does a lot more chores than the other one, but then it switches a couple weeks later. And that's okay because we're gonna have different types of weeks and different types of days, and you just sort of roll with it and acknowledge that it'll continue to adapt and to change. And so not to be cemented in the idea of this is how a relationship will work, this is how our relationship will work, these are the jobs we will have, etc. And just being adaptable to each other and whatever life situation we're in at the time.
Danny, being a boyfriend, being a fiance, being a husband, being a dad, what kind of, you've got on your dad hat, it looks like today. What adjustments have you had to make through these days?
I know some of the first adjustments I had to make, kind of speaking to the alone time thing from earlier, was just kind of learning how to balance getting the alone time that I know that I need with giving Donica the interaction and connection that I know she needs and helps her emotionally thrive. Early on, I felt all this pressure to just always be available, and Donica, through conversations and moments of frustration, she was just very kind in helping direct me to like, you don't always just have to be 100% on to give me this like big, thriving, extensive conversation. Sometimes all it takes is like, ask me a question and then just sit there and listen, or like give me a quick kiss and say I love you, and then just go do your thing. And then just learning that sometimes that, you know, it can be fine that sometimes one of us is like sitting on the couch watching a TV show and the other one is like in the kitchen getting lunch put together, and we're not talking, and that can be okay sometimes.
Did you just say a quick kiss?
Yes.
How many are in favor of a quick kiss? Does it change things? Does that sort of tenderness or respond to that, Donica?
I'll let you respond to that.
I love a quick kiss. I love lots of kisses, and I love them. I think they're great. But it really, for me, it does, like, especially, like, if I come home or I notice that, like, you're in a zone where you're like, I'm not going to really engage. I'm like, that is all I need. Just a quick, like, interaction, quick kiss. And then I'm like, great, back on my cloud.
We've all studied the love languages, you know, quality time and words of affirmation and physical touch and gifts and all that. Let me ask this question from a spiritual dynamic. How has your spiritual dynamic individually and as a couple influenced these first days, first years of marriage? Gabriella?
Throughout our whole friendship, dating, and engaged life, there was a time where I was just more spiritually led in our relationship. And it wasn't until I had talked to one of my mentors about it, and she was like, if everyone is good all the time, all the way, then you wouldn't need each other. That's what makes you a team. Because when you're down, he's up. And there will be a time when he is spiritually leading you, and we do switch off. That's why it's important for both of us that we grow together, we study together, because as we grow individually, we grow with Christ as we grow. So.
Brianna, let me frame the same question to you spiritually. How have the two of you wanted to grow together? What's been that desire of your heart spiritually as a couple?
Yeah, you changed the question a little bit.
Well, go ahead.
No, but underneath all of it, what's been great for us to know is that we don't have to be everything for each other. You know, at the end of the day, we both like to fix problems, and it can be hard when you're hearing your significant other's challenges or problems and you can't fix it. But it's okay. You just need to be there and listen, acknowledge the feelings, acknowledge what's going on, pray with them. But that is okay, because ultimately it is in God's hands, and both of our lives and our life together is in his hands. So I think that's been just foundationally a really substantial part of what our spirituality has meant in our relationship. But that being said, we also are very independent people. And so for us, it's actually been a challenge to figure out what does our spiritual life look like together, and how do we grow that? How do we be independent individuals but still dependent on one another and have a shared relationship in Christ as well? And that's something that we're still trying to learn and trying to establish and grow. And it's a process, but it's something that we're excited about, because we love where we are as a relationship today, but we also know that God can do so much more with our relationship.
Got a lot to look forward to.
Yes.
Ethan and Jesse, you got this coming together, and now in the first year, a boy. What has kept you going spiritually as a couple with all the changes and career changes?
Yeah, so first off, while we were engaged, I prayed to God that he would bless us with a baby boy on our wedding night. So Easton is proof that miracles will, and God's listening, he will answer your prayers. So be careful what you pray for. And I'm very happy he's here. So from my perspective, we're hyper-focused on Easton right now. How can we be the best parents for him? And I think it's us perfecting our relationship with God as him being our spiritual parent, so I can reflect that down to my parenting to Easton. So, you know, Easton, he's so observant. So, especially at just 8 months old, like, he watches everything we do, and he's listening, and he's starting to pick up on a few words right now. So that's pretty surprising. So it's how I'm interacting with Jesse in a Christian way, in a God-centered way. so I can be the best parent I can be to Easton. And how I can do that is becoming closer to God. So.
Some counselor teacher has said the best thing you can do for your child is to love their mother. And the best thing Jesse can do for Easton is to love his daddy. You want to respond?
I would just say, for me personally, and I'm sure you can attest to this, just seeing Ethan's growth over the last 2-3 years, and watching the Lord just work in him, and it has been like the honor of my life to witness that, and to know that that's a childhood and an upbringing that we get to give to our son that neither of us had. Neither of us had that loving home. Neither of us had Jesus at the center of our life, and we get to give that to him, and that's just like the greatest blessing in the world.
Anybody else, before we move on, have a response here? Lagunas? Spiritual dynamics?
Well, I would say I feel as we've been married a couple of years and learning what kind of ministry we want to see coming out of our marriage, the Lord's given us a heart for hospitality. And something we've grown to learn is that at the core of hospitality is a requirement to live sacrificially. For us to be able to be hospitable to other people in the long term, we have to learn now how we can live sacrificially for each other and how we can live sacrificially for our baby, for Cruz. And at the core of all of that is a God who lives sacrificially for us first. And learning that type of sacrificial love that comes from God will expand into living sacrificially for each other, and then being able to live sacrificially for the people that we want to give hospitality to.
I want to bounce back and ask Greg a question we kind of glossed over. You two touched on the differences in your personalities and how you approach tasks and life and organization. And I've known to a certain degree everybody here seated, but I think I wanted to ask you, Greg, the personality question. What have you discovered about you now as a husband?
Well, now that we're living together and building life together, there's no longer that separate, like, I think, Gabrielle, you may have touched on it, there were like you have, in the period of time that you're dating or even engaged, you kind of have that ability to go back to your own place, maybe your own apartment, and kind of reset, and then come back to the relationship with your best self. But that's no longer the case when you're living together and you kind of see it all. And so that being confident in the relationship to the point where I can be my best self and my worst self and know that Brianna will always be there for me. And just having now tested that for 2 years and continuing to do that, just really enjoying that confidence that she will always love me no matter who I am on a given day.
Taylor, I was going to ask you, because through school and everything, you've worked with people, you've worked out in the community, you've been kind of customer service based, dealing with the public, making sure the customer gets what they need. How has your personality difference come to light since you've started a marriage?
Yeah, obviously I think I am very much a people person. I like to be people pleasing to other people. Yeah, definitely dealing with customer service and that type of environment. I think it has helped me bring out sometimes the best in Gabrielle when she turns into that introvert sometimes. I will say I'm definitely more of the extrovert and she's the introvert. But sometimes we switch roles and sometimes we help bring each other back into that environment, especially at like parties when we're like, oh, she's off. But then it's like, oh, but we're good. Kind of just, I think we very much are different people, definitely different personalities. But she does things that I would not even think about, like think of things a week ago or think of things a week ahead. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that. And that always seems like the good thing to do sometimes for me.
Okay, I'm going to ask all 8 of you to put on your counselor hat, your advice hat. What would you say to engaged couples? If you had the best piece of advice to a couple that's just gotten engaged and they're heading toward their wedding plan, Dan, you start. What's the best advice you'd give somebody? Let's just go around the circle.
I'd give the same advice my dad gave me when I was thinking about it. He told me, right now is the time to decide that divorce is not an option. The only out that we're biblically given for that is infidelity, and unless that happens, this is the time to make the decision that anything you run into that isn't infidelity, the decision is going to be we're going to fight for each other, we're going to fight to be together, because there's nothing that we can't get through having the grace of God on our side. And if we make the decision now that divorce isn't going to be an option, it's going to change the game in how we handle finances, how we handle deciding to have children, how we handle fighting for each other in small things like disagreeing on a rug. Like, if we know divorce isn't an option, we're going to fight for each other even when it's something dumb, like we disagree on which rug is nice.
Best advice, Donica?
I have learned that marriage is like the most aggressive mirror you could ever look into. And I would say to that, be okay with looking in that mirror, because you're going to gain a new skin. And it could be painful, but it's going to be even more beautiful in the end because we make each other better.
Beautiful.
Effective communication. So I think it's hard to over communicate, right? I'm kind of touching on the personality. I wear all my emotions on my sleeve. I want you to know exactly what I'm thinking and feeling. He is a stone wall. And so for us, learning to just always communicate, always asking questions of, is something going on? Or are you just really tired? So the communication, but I say effective because there's a listening element too. It's not just talking, and it's not talking at each other, but truly listening and watching and observing and trying to understand and anticipate each other's feelings and needs, so that when you're talking, you're not talking at each other, it is a conversation.
And tied to that is just being confident in your relationship's durability to have the difficult conversations. You know that on the other side of a challenging conversation, your spouse will love you always. And it helps to keep that in mind so that things don't go unsaid and maybe cause just growing friction in the background. So go ahead and have the difficult conversations.
I would say embrace every season and also have grace in every season. So there's going to be times, just like in your own life, when you're on a spiritual high, that your marriage is in a high and things are going great and you're in sync. But there's also going to be seasons that are unforeseen, where either your partner is going through something, or you guys are working through something, or you have a child, or you have a death in the family. And just being able to be present in that moment, know you can lean on the Lord and know that you can lean on each other with grace and a tender heart. I think just being able to approach things with a tender heart completely changes any situation.
Yeah, so the latest piece of advice that stuck with me is if it all seems that it's going bad and you're in the dump, you're probably doing something right. And what I mean by that is the evil one doesn't like a strong couple. They don't like a God-centered couple. The evil one doesn't like God. So if it seems like it's going bad, you're probably doing it right. So try to recognize that in the moment. Okay, cool off, chill out, and then go back, approach your partner. If it's a big argument you had, we had a good argument this past week, and I thought to myself, well, we've been growing pretty strong here lately as a spiritual couple for Easton. So that's probably the evil one attacking me with those thoughts in my head, like, oh, be a little selfish. It's okay, or tempting me to do something. So just kind of recognize that and turn toward the good.
Perfect.
Yeah, to go off of that, something we learned early on was to face the problem, not the person. Because if you both are trying to win, then you both are going to lose. The best advice that I would say is that so many people have told us that if you put each other first, then you'll have success in your marriage. But my advice is to put God first, and everything else will fall into place. Because when you do that, when you build your relationship on that kind of love, that 1 Corinthians love, you'll see that it is kind and gentle and patient. And that kind of love is worth the wait, and that's the kind of love that's going to make it.
Final word, Taylor.
Kind of just bouncing off Gabrielle, kind of like marriage takes three. But my advice would be, if you were friends before, just never stop being best friends with the other person. Life is hard, already, and this person should be the person that makes life a little less hard. And then kind of something else that I would just like to mention, before you start something, think before you say it. True, is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Or is it kind?
Wonderful. Do we have any questions spontaneously from the audience? Anybody remark or question of these newlyweds?
Here's a question, Dave.
Yeah, come on. Roger.
So when talking about personalities, what have you learned about each other when disagreements have come up?
Apparently they don't disagree, so. Go ahead.
So I would say Ethan is a very calm person most of the time, but when he gets upset, he can kind of explode. Like the dogs see that a lot. And so me understanding that, like, okay, where is this emotional reaction coming from, and how can we like calm this down and figure out what's the root of it? Like, is it something that happened at work? And generally that's the cause, is there's another stressor or a trigger behind it, and then we can have a civil conversation and empathize with one another.
Some powerful insights today. Thank you all for your time and your contribution. And I want to thank you for watching. I'm Pastor Dave Grothe. This has been a panel discussion with newlywed couples. Thanks for joining us.